Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call, and I'm joined by my brother, the Gritty Broman, behind the camera. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thank you.
Today's podcast is with my buddy, Dwayne Sessions. It's a good show. Anytime I can sit down with a good friend, close friend, and just shoot the breeze, it's awesome.
Dwayne's been on the podcast a couple times. He's on the late season.
He's a gingery kind of looking guy, which is, I'm not sure if that's we debate that, but he's kind of a Montana native redneck, lives in Colorado at the moment. We met when I moved to Colorado. He's an awesome dude, and he has been on a journey in archery over the years since we met, where he's done a lot with my good friend
Phil
Mendoza down there at No Limits Archery out of Denver.
Taking some pot shots at his roof.
Yep, there's a lot. Yeah, true. He did shoot the roof with a hinge release the first time he shot.
Yeah.
We talk about that a little bit on the podcast. But the podcast with Dwayne is really about how he's evolved as an archer and as an archery hunter, because he's been
self-taught.
Yeah, I mean, once we met, I was able to help him kind of get on the path for becoming a better shooter. And then, of course, with the guys down at, you got Braden and Bo and Phil all down at No Limits, and Dwayne was able to meet all those guys, and you'll see him down there every now and then working in the shop. And he's done a bunch of stuff with the Alpha Bow Hunting Challenge, helping out there and being part of that group. He's competed in that event.
Did good.
And he's done a lot of 3D since then, just shooting with buddies and stuff. And he does a Total Archery Challenge, and he's upped his game. And he has been able to kill 2 years in a row bull elk archery season. One where they called a bull in, and one where he did a spot and stock. So his skills are diversifying, and he's getting better and better. And I remember when we first sat down and he shot his bow, I was like, yeah, you're a 20-yarder effective range.
Yeah.
Like, it was a hold and punch. It was a drive-by, time it kind of punch, And but he hadn't had anybody teach him. There was a death grip on the handle, and a little slam of the trigger. And if you don't have someone kind of walk you through it, and he had developed some habits, so that had to be unlearned and then relearned. So we get on this podcast. I just wanted to talk to him about it and how it feels to be like an elk slayer. 2 years in a row, making shots, killing bulls.
Because the first time he utterly wet the bed at like 4 feet.
Well, that is true. And I called the bull into him, and I was really mad at him that he blew that. But on today's podcast, we get into that. I think you're going to enjoy it. I hope you do. And follow Dwayne at 303 Trophy Husband on Instagram. Awesome.
That's a solid handle right there.
Before we get into this, use the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops. If you want to support the show and you're looking for some fitness stuff, we're using, I'll tell you, I like the Ignite. The Peak Lemonade's kind of my go-to, and I like Yeti for pre-workouts. Gives me a good buzz, get the niacin flush going, helps me like develop the guns, So I recommend that. I like the Blaze shots as well. I use Slumber when I'm trying to get some sleep. There's lots of stuff out there that Mountain Ops brings to the table, but they also have a lot of new workout gear that I'm digging, like built-in shorts, like going to the gym. Built-in underwear in my shorts. Like,
gotcha.
Nice. And then it's
a self-contained ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. It's got little pockets and zippers for my keys or my phone or my earbuds and stuff. And then the new hoodies and jackets and stuff.
The hoodie's legit. They nailed that hoodie.
They nailed it.
They nailed that hoodie.
The fit and the look is cool. So I like that. I think they're out of stock. But
surprise!
But they'll have some more here real soon. And then I really liked their Merinos that I used this year.
The Merinos are killer.
I like the Merino hoodies and
I look for excuses to wear it.
Just Merino just feels good in general.
It does.
And they have a great hoodie that I like, and they're getting more coming down the pipeline. So check that out. Use the code GRITTY at Peaks. Get yourself some trekking poles and some gaiters.
Soon some other goodies.
Yes, and check that out. And then Sheep Feet. Sheep Feet has been helping us out quite a bit. And if you've got foot problems, check them out, because Sheep Feet has those inserts those custom orthotic insoles that you put in your boot. I don't know how I lived life before sheep feet.
I need to get some. I've got wonky shaped feet.
I mean, I throw them in my crispy boots, and it takes a great boot, but takes it to a new level. And it's funny, Ryan was using them for like 6 months before I had heard about them. And I'm like,
before he mentioned that. He didn't even mention
he didn't mention them. I'm like,
heard about them,
yeah.
And then asked him.
And then I was like, this and heavy. And he's like, oh yeah, I've got those. I love them. I've been using them like the whole time. Like, oh.
I'm like 2 super nasty hunts.
Right. And what I found was now I don't get the cramping that I occasionally would get from, like, I don't know, maybe it's the arch support or that's built like that. But I also have the half ones that go in my running shoes. And I was telling Cam Haynes a while ago, like, how I would get these cramps in my calves up high or in my shins, and they'd lock up. And it was really a problem. And I was going through shoes, and well, I got those sheep feet, and they basically start at the front of your arch and come back. And there's like sort of 3/4 of a, they're not at the ball of my feet. I put those in my tennis shoes, and I've been running 5-6 miles with no issues. So, and I've been wearing the sheep feet in my boots as well on my hunts. So I'm just wondering if I'm starting to correct some problems that I was having. Maybe those cramps in my calves had more to do with my feet being a problem. All I know is right now I'm doing great, better than my shins and my calves are doing great in a way that I haven't for a while. But yeah, I highly recommend them, and use the code GRITTY. It helps out the show. So check those out. It's sheep feet. And I think that's it for today. Enjoy the show with Dwayne. Awesome dude, 303 trophy husband. Stay gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I'm joined by my buddy, Dwayne Sessions. And we're in Colorado right now. It's the holiday season. Christmas just happened a few days back.
Finally got a little snow on the ground.
Yeah, we were hanging out. It's been a while.
Yeah, been a year.
Yeah. So for those that are listening and don't know, Dwayne, met Dwayne when I moved to Colorado in 2016, I believe, something like that.
I think it was, yeah.
And you live right here near Evergreen in the mountains.
Yep, Indian Hills.
In a gorgeous little spot.
We're Indian Hillians.
Yep. And when I first met you, I wanted to have you on the podcast because, well, you're always entertaining to have on the podcast. You've been on before, but it's funny. When we first met, you weren't the greatest archer in the world.
No, it was a lot of self-teaching.
That led up to the point where we met.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you hadn't killed anything with a bow, had you?
Yeah, I'd killed
pigs.
Pigs, couple of whitetails, in Oklahoma. That's where I started bow hunting. I was, like probably almost 30 years old when I even picked up a bow for the first time. And
yeah, we met at church.
Yep.
And instantly, you had done some guiding.
Yep.
Lots of rifle hunting.
Yep.
Grew up in Montana.
Yeah. And
hunting in your blood and fishing, everything outdoors.
Yeah. But
bow hunting wasn't really in the repertoire, like not strongly anyway.
No. Growing up, I had nobody bow hunted in my family, and it was just always something I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of like, well, we're gonna go hunt. We have time to do it. Dad gets time off of work to hunt, and it was like, well, let's take the higher odds and go rifle hunting.
Yeah.
And we did a lot, and I grew up in some of the best mule deer country there is.
But you're no stranger to late season.
No,
because of the rifle stuff.
Yeah.
But hunting in August and September, that's a little different.
Very, very different.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get into today your archery journey because you killed a great bull elk this year during archery season, and you killed one last year too.
Yep.
Both under quite a bit different circumstances.
Yep.
And you're good friends with Phil Mendoza, like myself, down at No Limits Archery here in Denver area, and the Alpha team down there, the Alpha bow hunting crew, and has really been instrumental in your ability to become a better archer.
Yes,
I like to think I had a hand in that.
Yeah,
And
you're on my list.
the first time I introduced you to your first hinge, the very first hinge.
Well, I remember the first time we shot
bows.
Yep, I remember we were down here at Bear Creek Lake State Park, the range down there, and you guys are all setting up, and like 70 yards, poof, and 80 yards, and I'm sitting there going, can I set one up at 10? and there were like the only thing we had out there was the shortest was like 50 yards that we had set up because those bales were all those later bales were all beaten up, and we weren't shooting into them, and I remember pulling back there, letting an arrow go, and you guys stand there looking at me. You guys kind of looking at each other and looking at me, and it was like, just put it away for now.
It was so bad, dude. I remember coming to your house and watching you shoot, and I was like, this has to be torn down, burned to the ashes, and built back up from the ground up.
Yep.
I mean, every classic shooting problem that a guy gets when they just go buy a bow without any instruction, they just are like, you just draw and shoot it, right? You had every bad habit.
Yeah. I really had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have no consistent anchor point. It was I was a mess. Now,
and
I feel like like 20, 30 yards, I mean, you can fudge your way through it.
Right.
And
trigger panic. Fine. You were just putting that pin on there and just like slam.
Yep.
Slam. And there was a lot of like almost punching and flinching. Oh, yeah. And a lot of shooter input into the shot, like anticipating, anticipation, like feeding into the shot. And your groups were, you're lucky to hit the block at 30. There were times, I remember the first time, I think you missed the whole target 2 times.
Yeah. There's
the whole thing at like 30 yards.
I didn't even, for a long time, I had like a 5-pin sight, and I didn't have.
That's right.
I didn't even use the bottom 2 pins.
I remember.
It was a big deal if I used the 40-yard pin.
I remember as you were progressing, I was like, you need to try the hinge because that hinge release is a surprise release. You don't quite know when it's going to go off. And what it does is it kind of short circuits your ability to punch a trigger. And you're like, well, okay. I'm like, just don't punch yourself in the face, as you draw it back.
Yeah. And when you say that, I'm like, what are you getting me into here?
So Dwayne, I'm prepping him, all this stuff.
I was so like adrenaline rush. It was like I was shooting like I had an elk standing in front of me. I was so scared.
It took weeks to get you to do it, and you're like, and you finally were, and you were so adrenaline. And I just remember you go to full draw, and all of a sudden that arrow fires off at the ceiling at no limits.
I got the full draw, and I mean the whole time it's just like there full draw, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? And you're like, just let it down, and and then it goes poof, and ping, hits that.
You hit the metal rafter in the ceiling.
Yeah, and I remember the whole
carbon explodes.
Yep, everything's silent. It just goes silent for like 5 seconds. Everybody's like, Phil's back there like, what the hell's going on over there? And then and then everybody just starts laughing at me, and yeah. I should be able to sign that thing.
Right. It was quite the explosion.
That's what
I was like. It's a giant. I mean, that ceiling's probably, I don't know, 40 feet high.
Yeah, it's got to be. And and then Phil's like, oh, don't worry about it. There's been way worse. And I'm like, that doesn't make me feel any better.
Well, what happened too, this happens to guys. They get back to full draw, and they're used to the shot going off at a certain time.
Yep.
The body, the brain is just like used to, okay. And if you watch guys that punch the trigger a lot, there's a 1/1000, 2/1000, like to get to full draw, and then 3/1000, 4/1000, the shot goes, and they're so programmed for that timing and that punch. For them, there's no. If they actually time it, they always release the shot within 1 second of that, the same 1 second marker.
Yeah.
And you have that bad habit, and you're used to it.
Yeah.
When you get back there, and all of a sudden it doesn't go off at that time when you're expecting it to go off, people just like let go. Like
Yep.
they just let go of the release.
Yeah,
they let go
and I've done that a couple times.
It's like the brain's like go, and you just like let go of the bow or let go of the release, and what happens is sometimes people do what you did and it doesn't go off, and when it doesn't go off, they just jerk their arms around and the bow goes up, and then the release goes off, and the arrow goes.
You're trying to punch something that you can't.
Right.
You're just it's not happening.
And how disturbing is it to realize you have that issue? You know, because it's an eye opener when you grab a hinge like that, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. But I think the nice thing in my case was, even though I'd been, technically bow hunting for, a few years, I was pretty blank slate. Mm-hmm. And so, I feel like that, kind of any habit, I was so dumb with it that I didn't really have a consistent, like, this is how I'm going to do it. I feel like it was pretty easy to kind of break it down and put it back.
You hadn't reinforced them.
Yeah.
You didn't have a consistent process.
Yeah.
You just were winging it.
Yeah. Yeah. But the hinge, it was so, that probably wasn't even the worst experience with it. I was down there one day, and I think it was me and Braden and
at No Limits.
Braden Forsyth, yeah, and we're I'm over there shooting. He'd walked over behind the counter to do something, and I was just shooting at 20 yards, and I pulled that back, and I'm sitting there at that hinge, and I don't know. I still to this day, I'm like, I let go of the release.
Right.
And
I've seen that.
And it went. Luckily, I didn't have a carbon bow, because that riser would have been gone. I still on that bow, I have that idiot mark on the aluminum riser. Busted my rest off. The sight,
because the release shot through.
Yeah, went through the bow. Broke the release in like 3 pieces, and and luckily. Luckily, True Ball was nice enough to just fix it for me and send it back and be like, "Don't do it again." But and then there was another time I was out here in the driveway, and at this point I'm pretty cocky with this hinge. I'd used it a lot for just shot execution, mm-hmm. and I had a little micro cord lanyard around it so that I wasn't always digging in my pocket for it, and. Let that freaking thing go again.
With your hand, you just let go of the release.
Yep. And I don't know if I let go, if it slipped out of my hand, but that thing comes shooting through, bust my rest again. Luckily, it didn't hit the riser or anything.
But it's around your neck.
It's around my neck, and it ripped that microcord off my neck. Really? And I had a red mark around my neck and stuff, and I go down there. I go down to No Limits and walk in with my bow. I'm with my tail between my legs, and Braden, and Braden's like, "You did it again, didn't you?" I'm like, Braden, you guys. I come in here with new stuff that you guys haven't seen. I hear it a lot. I bring my bow, and they're like,
"That's right.
I've never seen this before." I'm like, you're welcome. Now you have. Now you know what to do next time.
Well, the thing is you smoked a bull last year.
Yep.
And then you smoked one this year, and big bulls, good bulls, and that's a far cry from before. And I'd say this is your 3rd year. So your first year, we hunted together archery for elk.
Yeah, I guided archery hunters for a few years.
Yeah,
but I'd never bow hunted for myself.
You'd never put in the dedication to hunt during archery season the way you did.
Right.
So 3 years ago was the first time you really went at it.
And I should have had a bull then.
And you should have had a bull, because I called one into like 5 feet of you.
I don't know if he was that far.
3 feet.
Yeah.
I don't know how, to this day.
I could touch it.
So that bull came in tight, and then and you, there were some close calls. You walked away from that season, come back the next year, kill a bull, come back again this year, kill a bull.
Yep.
A lot of guys, spend a lot of time out hunting, and granted, you had a lot of hunting time under your belt, just not archery hunting time.
Right.
But still killing a bull with a bow every, or 2 years in a row even, is something that most guys, will never do. Yeah. A lot of guys will never do.
Well, and I honestly went into it this year, like, I was thinking, I had an awesome year last year, and I kind of beat some odds and kill the bull. I'm like, honestly, this year's just gonna be fun.
Yeah.
I want to kill the bull.
Mm-hmm.
I want that, meat and everything else. But if it didn't happen, I was like, so I really felt
Dwayne,
no pressure this year.
But still, you're a different hunter with a bow in your hand now than you were 3 years ago.
Yeah.
There's just a confidence you're going to get it done.
Yeah.
If that opportunity comes your way. It takes a long time. So they say a lot of times once a guy kills one bull with his bow, it just sort of starts happening every year.
Yeah.
It could be the same for deer as well. Just you need those kills, a couple of those in a row, and you're like, dude, I got this. Like you start to put the pieces together, and that's hard. But you worked really. See, I don't want to shortchange the amount of time you put into your archery skills because I feel like a lot of archery hunters put a lot of time into gear selection, where they're going to hunt, tags, and they put in a lot of hours shooting their bow in their backyard or out of range, but they don't put in a lot of hours into becoming better. Just because you shoot a lot doesn't make you a better shooter. Practice, what do they say? Perfect practice makes perfect. Not just practice. You shot a bunch before we met. It was crappy.
It was just shooting. I mean, it wasn't there. There was no rhyme or reason to it. I was just getting out and letting arrows fly, which isn't that's not a bad thing either. When I met you and kind of started hanging out down there at No Limits and just being able, the guys that I've had around
access to.
I mean, just from Phil to Bo Theory and Jason Pell and Braden Forsyth and Henry Ferguson too. I've got these guys that they're amazing shooters.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole community, guys that are willing to go shoot every day. Mm-hmm. And talking to each other, but those guys that I get like they all have a little bit different style, they all have a little bit different process, but that's where the advantage is I'm able to kind of pick and choose what works for me,
right?
And then I did stuff like I did Phil's the Alpha Pyramid class series and you did
the Alpha Bow Hunting Challenge.
Yeah,
too,
I did that.
Those contests.
And now I work that. I work at that for Phil, and I go down and sit down and build arrows. Learning about tuning the bow and all that. And I'm in a little bit my situation. I'm a little bit spoiled too, where I have time I can do that.
Right. Well, we were out in your yard, in your driveway yesterday, shooting arrows down range, and the way you shoot now is so different than when we first met.
Yeah.
You're a real archer at this point, and you carry that into the woods, and it makes a big difference. So I wanted to cover two things. One is how you became better with the bow. Some things you think really were pivotal moments for you, aha moments, or just things that you would recommend other guys go and do. What worked, and then on the hunting scene, getting in bow range, I feel like that happens to a lot of guys. Making the shot under pressure doesn't. That's a select few, and I think that it goes hand in hand with your archery skill that has come into play.
Yeah.
But I want to get into some of that, the actual in the field and how you made the shots. I do know this. My friend Corey Miller, one time he told me, eventually, because I was hunting with a buddy, eventually he will be so disgusted by the number of missed shots and failures that he's had that he will make sure he does not miss the next opportunity.
Yeah.
And I feel like I rubbed in your failure on that first hunt so much that that had to burn a little bit. So that the following year, you're like, didn't have time to get nervous. It was like there was a little bit of proving other people wrong that was into it. But tell me, what are some of the biggest factors that helped you, that you think has changed the way you shoot?
The first of all is dumping the wrist rocket, the index finger release, and picking up the hinge, and just working on a consistent, solid shot process. How that bow feels, where it's supposed to be on your hand, and that consistent anchor point in the back, and settling into a shot, and if it's and letting down, that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do, and I still struggle with it. It's hard to make yourself let down. You're like, well, I went to all this work to get back to this spot. Well, it's something's
wind is
off.
blowing, or you're just not.
Something's off. With whether
you're not going to make a good shot.
Yeah.
Let it down.
Yep. And and I mean, you do that just by practice. Getting out and shooting 3D and things like that.
That translates into real world too. When you have an elk or deer in front of you and you come to full draw. Yep. There's some guys, once they're at full draw, they're letting that arrow rip no matter what. Yep. Being able to say, he walked behind a tree. Yep. You know what, I'm gonna wait, or there's some brush here. Let it down, come to draw again. Yep. It's funny. Some guys, once they're back on a live animal, they're just like, it's got to happen. They got to let it go.
Well, and it's amazing this year, hunting whitetails down in Oklahoma. It was amazing how many times I was able to make myself let down because I was not going to make a good shot, and I would rather let that. And I had Pope and Young class whitetails.
Dude, your buck is by me giant. What does that thing score? You smoked a giant in Oklahoma with your bow this year. Whitetail. Yep. So cool. Yeah, man, there's so much nerves in executing those shots. It's not easy to do. Yeah. Being able to let down, big deal. So did you hunt with the hinge?
I did that first year with you. I had the hinge, and I hunted that whole year with it, and I don't think I ended up. I killed a whitetail that year with it. But as things kind of progressed and evolved for me, what I found is I'll go out and I'll train a lot with that hinge. Especially if I start seeing that I'm developing some bad habits. I switched over and got a thumb release. I shoot that thing great, but you do have a tendency sometimes to punch that trigger. And so what I'll do, my thumb release is almost the exact same dimensions as my hinge. And I did that on purpose so that I could kind of switch back and forth, and I've still got the same feel with everything as I'm practicing with that hinge release, and and getting my form down. When I'm practicing with the hinge, I usually don't really even worry about where I'm hitting on the target. I'm not really focused on that. I'm focused more on, am I executing the shot?
Yes.
And so and then when I switch back over to that thumb release, it's very similar feelings. I can shoot that thumb release almost the exact same as that hinge, and it does the same thing. But if you get into a situation where you kind of have to make a little bit quicker shot, short distances, you can make it go off. Yeah, and that was the big thing for me for switching.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Like, I hunt with the thumb button release. I use the knock to it.
Yeah, I use that Stanislavski Perfects. Yeah, I think that's the one it is.
I use an HT hinge, a True Ball HT.
Yeah,
and I discontinued.
I still use the True Ball. Is it the Sweet Spot?
The safety?
Yeah, with the safety, because I'm still a chicken.
Yeah, the safety is nice. I mean, that's something a lot of people don't know about. If you do the True Ball Sweet Spot, it's got a safety on it, so it can't accidentally go off. Yeah. So people who don't know, when you have a hinge release, it's on a rotation. Yep. And once the release rotates back, it'll let the string go. And so as there's a risk is you draw the bow back if you
on the draw.
Yeah, yep. if you're pulling that thing and you don't keep the rotation correct, which is easy to do, it'll fire the arrow. And so what's nice is when you have the HT, you can lock it so that there's no matter what, it will not go off during the draw. So that way you can draw, settle, get comfortable
Yep.
on the site, then turn the safety off,
Yep.
then rotate.
Yep. And there's a guy down there at No Limits, Roger, older guy. You know, he's at least in his 70s, and he's down there. He's another great. If he's down there shooting, anybody that walks in the door, I mean, he'll
Help you out.
if you want it. Yeah, he'll do it. And that's what I did. I mean, I went in there and I just, you know, a lot of those guys, ego the way it is, you know, we tend to go into a place like that and be like, I don't want your help.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that way with any of them. And even now, I mean, they can be standing back behind the counter and notice something with my form, and they just yell at me. You know? But Roger, he's still, I mean, the guy, he's won, you know, tons of like world titles and stuff with target archery shooting, and he still shoots that sweet spot.
Yeah.
You know, with the safety, and I love just standing there watching him shoot it.
Right. So the hinge was a big part of it.
Yeah.
What else? I mean,
just drill. It's something I wanted to do. It was a goal I'd had for a long time, you know, and didn't want to get myself in that situation and crap the bed again.
I mean, at what point did you realize, hey, I could win in alpha bow hunting, or I can outshoot some people. Like, I'm actually good at, what was that moment where you're like, dang, archery's fun?
It was probably actually, it was like a alpha, it was kind of like a preview event. And we went down there and you know, I no confidence in myself. I was like, there's no way I'm going to run this thing, you know, and I ran that course, you know, head to head with somebody.
And for people who don't know, it's basically, to provide some context.
Yeah.
It's you and one other guy, and there's like 4 targets.
Yeah.
Or 5 or whatever. And you basically have to, you run out and you shoot all 4 targets.
Yeah. You
before
run
the
out,
next guy.
You have a weighted pack, and you're running back and forth and you know, dropping sandbags and stuff into sleds and stuff.
So while your heart rate's up,
shooting
and
targets,
you're doing a little
You
exertion.
know, anywhere from like 15 yards out to 45 yards.
It's like a 2-minute race.
Yeah.
And you got to shoot like 4 or 5 targets, and whoever has the fastest, can do it the fastest and hit the bullseye, wins. And there's a factor that goes into it. Doesn't matter if you finish and you don't hit any bullseyes, you know, and the other guy's way slow and he hits all the bullseyes. Yeah.
They got to be way slow. If you hit them all, there is the rare occasion where, you know, somebody will go through and only hit like 2 targets and beat somebody that hit all 4. But they're really slow.
Yeah.
And but that event, you know, going down and running that and you know, and winning
that day,
winning,
you had no confidence you could do it.
No, I mean, I was like, you know what, I'm you know, I at that point I'd been really focusing on my shooting and stuff, and I went out there and, you know, it was just a practice round, and I won the, you know, that practice heat, and I was like, I'm not that bad. You know, and even now, I mean, I'm still, I mean, there's, you know, I'm still, I go down and but I just, the confidence level just kind of took off right there. And, you know, and I ran that event, one of their events there, and then I ran it up in South Dakota too. And I didn't win it, but I felt really good about it. And it was, you know, and it really gives you some insight into, you know, what you're going to do when that heart rate's up, and it's amazing how nervous, you know, how the adrenaline's going with that elevated heart rate, you know, after you've been running and stuff. It really helps you. Opens up a whole nother package of things that you need to work on.
Well, and I would argue that that particular event, there's a difference between elevated heart rate and adrenaline.
Right.
There are some overlap. There is some overlap with the feeling, but they are different.
Yep.
Because with elevated heart rate, I don't lose fine motor skills.
Yeah.
I just am fatigued.
Yes.
My chest is heaving.
Yep.
With adrenaline, you can lose fine motor skills. Your fingers don't work. You can't even get the release onto the string.
You forget
you forget things. You black out. with a elevated heart rate, super fatigued, and I'm tired, but I'm super calm. In a sense, it's a totally different feeling. And some people don't realize, when you're doing the alpha by yourself, no one's there, and you're just kind of running the course. You get the elevated heart rate, right? And you get the fatigue, and you're shooting with the breathing heavy. But all the adrenaline stuff's not there because there's no crowd. There's no peer pressure. There's no, you're such a loser. There's no worrying about what people think. There's no doing it under the eyeballs of a ton of people. That's why when you actually do it in an event, you might smash it by yourself down there on a course in the afternoon when nobody's there. And you're like, man, I'm good. Then you get there.
But when you got all those guys back there,
heckling
and depending on who you are and who, whether or not they know you. But like me, if I go down there and just absolutely crap the bed, I mean, I hear it from 5 different guys.
Right.
And it's relentless.
And that adrenaline, that you do get adrenaline in that situation because you're performing under pressure, under peer pressure in a sense. And so when you combine the elevated heart rate and the exertion with the adrenaline, it really does mimic what it's like when a real animal, a big 6x6 bull comes out and screaming in your face. And if you can, that's when I started to realize, outside of the hunting space, in a practice situation, I got really good with the hinge. I got so good I was dropping bombs at 110 yards and putting them all in an elk's kill zone.
And that's
with broadheads, just like
that was the other kind of aha moment that same year. I went to a TAC event, and and there's a bunch of now. I mean, there's all kinds of cool archery events that are very similar to that. And I would just suggest going, because the first time I went to a TAC event, I'm like, oh man, those are some long shots. I'm like, going into it, I'm like, well, I can move up. Well, you're not moving up.
Not when you got like 5 buddies or 8 guys, and they're all
not. You're not moving up. But I remember, that first time, settling into that shot and at like 70 yards or something, and letting that arrow go, and watching that, hit the vitals on that 3D target, and going, I can do this. I'm not that bad.
Yep. Yeah. I think the TAC events are big. They're huge.
They're great. And I mean, I hear the criticism that, well, nobody should be shooting that far on an animal. Well, we're not. We're shooting foam animals, and it's giving you an excellent opportunity to see where you're at with your distance.
For sure. I mean, you can say like 50 yards and in, I just don't miss the kill zone.
Yep.
Anything beyond that in my groups, I might hit it.
They widen out.
Right. You also learn, well, my setup doesn't perform well in the wind. Yep. My arrow's too light, and
you really find out when you're shooting 100 yards what your arrow's going to do in the wind.
Yeah, especially in snowbird, up in those peaks where the wind is gushing
even if
through.
Even if it's not a bad, you don't think it's a bad wind. Mm-hmm. It's just
you can't see all the
light
wind.
Breeze.
Yeah.
And you let that arrow go, and it moves 2 feet, and you're like, whoa.
It's the same thing shooting a hinge in the wind.
Yeah.
You realize, man, I shoot the hinge so well, then all of a sudden you get up on one of those windy peaks, and you're shooting a 75-yard shot, and you're like, this is impossible.
Yeah.
I can't punch it, really, so I can't time it.
Yep.
You start to realize those real-world limitations in a sort of a high mountain. It depends, some areas like Seven Springs isn't exactly high mountains in Pennsylvania, but still,
but you still get that event still gives you the shot angles, those steep shot angles.
And if you're hunting in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of each location has terrain features and issues that help you. So I lose more arrows shooting through trees in Pennsylvania than I do shooting open country in Montana.
Which is another thing too. I mean, I recommend you go out on a 3D target and shoot through some brush and see what your arrow does.
Sometimes you start to realize that you need to aim right at the log, but the curve of your arrow is going to go over it.
Yep.
But that's how
even at the middle of right dead center of a lot. It's hard to make yourself do it.
It is.
You're like, I'll just put it right on the top of it and sneak it over. Well, the way they have those targets set up, if you do that, your arrow's going over the animal.
Yep. And then there's the ones where there's a rock right next to the vitals.
Yep.
And to get it in there, you got to hug that rock tight. And blown up arrows are everywhere. But all that's to say, like, when you have the adrenaline come in, that was a moment for me where I realized an elevated heart rate and exertion and fatigue is not the same thing as adrenaline.
Yeah.
And in order for me, when I ran a hinge and I was fatigued, it was fine. I could pull through and do all that stuff because my hand and everything worked. And there's different ways to operate a hinge. As I've progressed, I've seen some of the archers, more of the archers rotate with their hand than relax and use back tension.
Yeah.
And I used to relax and use back tension, but the bows had a lot squishier back walls.
Right.
And they've all kind of moved more to a hard back wall.
Yep.
And when I pull as hard as I used to, pulling the wheels off through a back tension release, it worked really well when I shot a Hoyt Defiant 34.
Yep.
Now I don't do that because it pulls me off target.
Yep.
But I couldn't relax. My hand became the iron claw of death in an adrenaline situation.
Right.
And I couldn't get my index finger to relax on the hinge as I pulled through, or my arms or anything. I was too much tension. So then I couldn't get the release to fire on the animal. I'm like, fire.
Yeah.
And I couldn't
This
do
should
it.
be going off.
Should be going off. And then you're wobbling all over, and then you're trying to make it go. That's when I've moved more toward a rotation. I put my third finger on the actual release as I pull and kind of bend it. And that way, even if I'm under intense pressure, even if my hand is the iron claw, I can still pull through on the hinge really nicely. And I shoot that hinge much better than I used to. But I still hunt 90% of my shots are with the thumb button.
Yeah.
But I learned again that what I thought I was really quite good, because at tack and everything else, I was drilling with the hinge.
Yeah.
And then I got into like the alpha and tried to win with the alpha. And in an event where I was really calm, just practicing, again, I smoked everything. When the adrenaline came, I realized I couldn't get the hinge to go.
Yeah.
I'd stand there and just stand there, and the adrenaline, and there's nothing I can do about adrenaline. Like in one sense, when it comes on you and that big giant buck is coming in, I don't know that I'll ever get to the point where I'm just like, no big deal. No, when that bull elk is screaming and he's a giant 6, my adrenaline takes over.
Yep.
And so working within the limits of my abilities, figuring out how I can execute a good shot with adrenaline is a totally different ball game than executing a good shot without adrenaline. And I think that's where a lot of guys fail, taking their skill from the backyard to the woods, is they don't quite know how they shoot with adrenaline.
Yeah.
And they're totally opposite. And a lot of guys that get to hunt 7, 8, 9 whitetails that walk through there, they get adrenaline.
Yep.
They get used to some of that. They learn how to perform with the adrenaline, or just, there's no substitute for killing. The more animals you kill, the more confidence you have, the more you manage that adrenaline. But still, like you see Ranella say, why do I have to lust for that animal so bad? I want it so bad that I choke. The adrenaline hits me because I want to kill that bull so bad with my bow.
Yep.
Or that giant buck.
Well, and I mean, there too, I mean, it comes back around your fundamentals. If you're fundamentally sound, and that was one of the things that Phil, pounded into me. If you're fundamentally sound with, and have absolute confidence in your shot process, he said, that kind of, you're going to have to deal with the adrenaline one way or another. But if you have that absolute confidence in that shot process, you're taking that worry out of the equation.
Right.
It's just adrenaline then.
Definitely. Preparation helps. Preparation and skill definitely helps you combat adrenaline because there's confidence, and increased levels of confidence lets you know, like, okay, this is a big time 3-pointer I got to make before the bell rings.
Well, but it's like, I
put in the time. I can make this shot.
Going through shot situations even. And again, I'm plugging Phil's pyramid program because the alpha pyramid, because it's just all these different things that you may not necessarily think about ahead of time, and it kind of prepares you. But I mean, shot angles, where you can shoot the animal, how that thing needs to be standing, ethically, should you take these shots, and that's another part of the preparation going into it, and again, that removes another thing from that equation to where then you're not worried about that anymore, and you can focus on how am I going to suppress the adrenaline rush.
Right.
But I don't know.
When so definitely the hinge was big time, and then figuring out how to shoot with the adrenaline going, and running through, putting yourself in a situation where you actually did the alpha challenge, for example, in front of group or at TAC.
Yep.
Those were pivotal moments too. You're saying that they definitely gave you confidence. You're like, hey, I'm actually not bad. I'm dropping.
I can make.
I'm hitting a 75-yard target at TAC just like everybody else.
Yep.
I can do this. Yep. Yeah, I think those are huge. And
then as I go back to those events too, I get, I'm like, okay, last time I shot TAC, I hit, I was hitting foam on these targets. Now I want to make sure I'm in those vitals. I want to focus on, getting shots into those vitals at those longer distances.
Given, everybody has different anatomy, different body, different bows, different everything.
Yeah.
What is it in that you kind of tend to have is your weakness? Like you tend to do when you shoot and you make a bad shot, it's kind of because you did X.
Well, I mean, I'll still, I mean, I know when I'm punching the trigger, and I still struggle. I still struggle with little things. Sometimes it's grip. Sometimes it's I have a tendency to right as that shot's about to go off, kind of drop my bow arm just a little bit. And makes
just to see the target, or just
it's almost like, oh, it's about to go off, and after the shot
you break
goes,
down just a second before the shot goes.
Right, you
sort of quit on the shot early.
Yeah,
I do that too. I drop my bow arm.
Yep.
I tend to not pull straight back on the bow. Sometimes I collapse a little bit and I pull toward myself.
Yep.
Instead,
when I start doing stuff like that, if I'm using that thumb release and I start and that form starts breaking down again, I put the thumb release away. I pull the hinge back out, and I take circles and dots out of it, and I'm just focusing on the process.
Yeah. I think that's smart too. Is to have a 3D elk or deer target.
Yeah.
That you can set that in front of a bigger target if you want, but I feel like, and I have a big giant like block target that's like 5 feet by 5 feet, and then I'll put a 3D target in front of it like a deer for two reasons. One, I know a lot of guys, they want all this pressure on them, so they like to take a 70-yard shot at a tiny foam target because it's like that, it mimics the pressure of the animal in the hunt. What I find is, it actually makes me implement bad behavior.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried about missing so much and blowing up an expensive arrow setup, especially as I like to practice with broadheads. It's like all of that just adds anxiety that I don't need, that I don't actually think translates, because when I'm aiming at an animal, I'm actually very confident. I'm not worried about losing the arrow. That's the least thing from my mind.
Right.
And so when I aim at the animal, I'm focused on the shot, and I feel a different pressure than aiming at a small foam target with an arrow in practice.
Yeah.
I don't feel like they translate very well for me. Yeah. So I want to be able to shoot 90 yards at that 3D. I like not focusing on a dot. I like focusing on vitals.
Right.
I think it keeps you from getting target panic and other things, because dots play with the brain. And I can just aim at the 3D in the vital zone, and if I miss, I'm going to hit that foam target in the back. I don't lose an arrow. So I start shooting with impunity and relax, and I drop them down in there. And then when I got so much confidence that I'm not going to, that I'm just hitting that, then I step out and start shooting those 3Ds at 80 and 90. And I'm just like, I've done it so many times with the backdrop that I know I don't miss, so I don't worry about the arrows being lost. I think too many times guys jump into, the tough, tiny target that they might miss before they have the skill to not miss it.
Right.
And so it just adds a lot of mental games that you don't need at the moment.
Yep.
Muddles the system, Keep it clean. I don't like losing arrows.
Yeah. Yeah. And even though you get them at a steeper discount than most of us,
it's funny. Still, I get them free, and I still just can't stand it.
Right. But that's not a bad thing.
No, but I do find I shoot better when I have 24 arrows.
Yeah.
I like having 24 or 30 arrows with me. Just because, why I shoot better? Because if I lose one, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
And I grab another one, and I grab another one, and I grab another one.
Yeah.
And so there is a mental game. The more arrows you have.
I actually get nervous, even though I get nervous sometimes if I drop below, because I'll buy a dozen.
If I drop below 18, I don't like it.
Yeah. If I'm my number's probably like 14. If I hit that point where I only have a dozen arrows on hand, I'm kind of like, I need to be more careful. And I'm like, but it's like you still got 12 arrows.
Well, let's talk about the animals, because last year you had a bull come into a call.
Yep.
And you came to the full draw at the right moment.
Yep.
And the bull, you hit it chest on.
No, he was actually kind of he was quartered a little bit away from me.
Yeah.
And
what'd you learn from that experience, and how did you capitalize on that one? In the year before you didn't. The year with me,
it was in the back of my mind, and actually, it was kind of a blessing, because right before that, probably 15 minutes before this bull came in, Casey had called. There was another one that we were working, and I was on the move trying to get up to where I could get a shot at him, and Casey was hanging back, and I got busted, and I remember. And I remember thinking to myself, thinking about the previous year and being like, don't rush things. Make sure you've got yourself in a spot where you can make a shot, and and that initial adrenaline, kind of just punch was gone, because that bullet, But at the same time, I'm like, freak, we're not gonna. That's it. We're done.
Yeah.
And Casey going, dude, there's still elk over here. And we get over there, but some of the mistakes I made, I mean, and Casey had his phone going, so I got to watch a lot of it, and I went back through it. I timed like my draw and everything just right, because he came through some brush, and what I did though was he was kind of angling off towards me, and he was still taking steps. He was, he'd take a step and kind of look for that cow call, and then kind of maybe take a couple more steps. Well, he was still kind of moving, and I let that, I didn't follow him with my bow. I settled in on him and let it go, rather than continuing with him and as he's moving, and he took a step, and I actually hit him, pretty far back, to the point that I thought we weren't going to find him. And luckily we ended up, I lucked out, got an artery, and found him, 40 yards away. But I was able to kind of break that down, and and look at that. Everything looked good, other than I stopped.
And how'd you feel during the shot? Because it wasn't just some wild errant shot.
No, it wasn't.
It was a calm, collected.
Yep. I
get my peep lined with my sight.
It was really funny, because after I let that arrow go, that was one of my first few thoughts was, I didn't crap the bed. I
didn't black out.
Yeah,
didn't.
Everything,
didn't panic.
Everything just kind of cleared up, and it was, and I'm like, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like the preparation leading up to it, it makes you able to focus on how you're going to deal with the adrenaline.
Right. When I was with you, one of the mistakes was hiding behind some brush instead of getting in front of it.
And on this one, I got out. I was probably 10 yards from the nearest tree.
Yeah.
And I just remember that was another thing you told me at that time was, why are you getting into trees? Why did you spend money on this clothing and this camo and whatever and this gear to hide yourself and then go hide in a freaking tree? You're like, that was dumb.
Yeah, you had that bull come into 3 feet or whatever it was, and at any point, had you.
But I remember that too. I mean, I was shaking. For an hour after that. Even after you were like, "Well, there's more. Let's go." And and I remember having a hard time keeping up with you at all because I was so everything was just tight on me. It was
such a cool experience though to have him
yeah,
walk that
super
close.
Cool.
I expected you to Texas hard shot him.
Yeah.
And shoot him at 10 feet, you know.
Oh, yeah.
That was wild. And totally different feeling though the second time when you just kept it all together.
Yeah.
So this third time you did a spot and stalk, which is my favorite so far of your stories now, because you spot and stalked a bull and smoked him.
Yeah.
How did that go down, and how did that feel?
Well, and again, I mean, I've spent a lot of time, you know, in the lead up to this, kind of going through scenarios in my mind. You know, how would I, even with my dumb 3D targets out in the yard, I'm like, you know, how would I approach this thing coming from this direction? You know, things like that. And I blew. Well, I ran out of daylight on one. And another one I just completely blew. You know, I'd blown 2 other stalks that week, but the elk they weren't really doing what they normally do. And you can say, you know, drought, whatever, they just weren't.
Right.
And
pretty quiet.
And a lot of guys at that point, they're like, I'm done. They're not cooperating. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Well, with me and, you know, the guys that I've, you know, been around and you know, the methods that you and you know, and all these other guys that I've been under their tutelage, I guess, they're not doing what you feel like they should do. So what? You know, it's time to grind. And so I was just like, you know what? We're going to go, we're going to, and it's a great area because we have a spot we can glass from. And so we're going to go up. I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to go up. I'm going to glass. I'm going to find where these elk are at, and we're going to go after them. We're going to go into that area and try to, you know, and try to figure out what they're doing. And so I was just grinding, and, you know, and I hadn't completely abandoned the elk calls. I'd actually cow called an elk in the night before that my brother-in-law, hit a branch, and, you know, it was an unfortunate situation, but they weren't working consistently. We weren't getting, nothing was responding.
Yeah.
Everything, like that guy came in quiet, but, you know, I get this opportunity, and, you know, we spot this bull at like 100 yards, and, you know, and we had no idea that he was there. He was bedded down, you know, underneath a tree in some shade, chilling out, asleep, you know, awake, asleep, you know, and
that's so cool.
I took my time. My brother actually spotted him, and we, you know, kind of talked about it, and he was kind of working in from a different direction, and kind of staying in some timber and staying out of sight. Well, I'm like, the best shot I got is to kind of circle around him here, but I don't have a lot of cover. But the sagebrush is, you know, tall.
Knee, waist high,
and so I was like, well, I can crawl, and that's the other thing is you know, the patience involved, because if you start rushing it,
I always tell myself on these stalks, like, a lot of times I feel like they're a gift.
Yeah,
like this thing's dead. The only thing that can screw it up at this point is myself by being impatient. Yeah,
yeah, and just, you know, talking to guys and talking about, you know, 100-yard stalks that take 2 hours,
right?
You know, and so I was just like, it was like painfully slow. You know, I'm down there, you know, on my belly, on my hands and knees, you know, whatever, and I'm moving my bow up through the brush, and then, you know, I'm crawling up to it, and, you know, every so often, you know, I'd take my binoculars and I'd like stick them on my eyes, and I just, you know, just to where I could just you know, put my hood up, everything, trying to break up outline, anything, and just to where I could just barely see him, you know, and just kind of make sure he was
still there, not looking at you.
Yep. And, you know, it was, I think it took me like an hour and 15 minutes to close 70 yards. I got to 30 yards, you know, ran out of cover completely. I had a tree there that, you know, to where I could get up on my knees and he couldn't see me move. It was a big old bushy, juniper tree. And, you know, and I'd been keeping an eye on my brother too, and he was, you know, about the same distance. He was watching me, and if I moved, then, you know, he'd keep an eye on the bull and move, and, you know, just make sure that it wasn't looking at him either. And
it's funny because nowadays I'll watch film. I'll watch guys that, you know, YouTube, and people will post their hunts, and I'll see a guy spot an animal and begin his stalk, and I can almost tell instantly whether that stalk's going to end in failure or success based on
You got to make a game plan.
Well, the game plan and the speed.
Yes.
These people are just going in. I'm like, I can tell you right now without watching the rest of this film, he's going to fail.
Yeah.
He's going to fail. That fail. Run away. It's going to run away. That's going to run away. Like, I know.
Yeah.
Because the slowness needed to sneak up on animals, it seems like most guys don't realize what that is.
As soon as you think that you can get away with some type of rapid movement in the middle of that stalk, I feel like
it's over.
You're done. Yeah. So and
or
maybe
noise.
And maybe you
some
could.
kind of noise. You're like, oh, there's some.
I would say maybe not done. You decrease your odds significantly.
Yeah.
Of having that stalk go any further. Maybe you could get away with it, but the odds are not there. The odds are not on your side.
This is what I see happen a lot. A lot of guys they'll go, what if he gets up? It looks like he's going to get up. Okay, well, then I better move really fast now.
Right. What are you going to, and that's my thing too. You have a bow in your hand. He gets up and you move really fast.
Yeah.
How, okay, so say you do manage to close the gap and get to 40 yards. Mm-hmm. You think that thing's going to stand there?
That's what I mean. Guys will blow up their opportunity.
Whereas if they stand up, there's pretty good odds.
They might walk right to you.
Or lay right back down.
Right. That's where I've watched lampers on the stalk.
And even then, if you still have the element of surprise on your side, that thing gets up, even if he goes and walks up over the hill.
Yep. You're still in the game.
Yep.
That's where
I've
watched Ryan Lampers do this, where it's like there's a rule. There's like, I'm not going to blow this up.
Yeah.
And as long as the animal still doesn't know I'm here, there's always a chance. Too many other guys I've watched, they're like, oh, he's getting up, he's getting ready to leave. Okay, I need to just close 20 yards.
Yeah.
And they gamble on getting closer too fast rather than the other way and just saying, I know that's a failure. Like, that's my thing mentally now is it's like, well, sure, I could close 20 yards, and I know it's almost a guaranteed failure.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, well, maybe I'll get lucky.
Yeah.
Well, why? Because you're always still in the game. So let's say he gets up, like you said, feeds, beds, and he turns the other way.
Right.
You're still in it.
Yep.
But because you panic and you just ran for it, you lose that opportunity. Yep. So I see that happen a lot, and I see the same thing happen with shots. I say this, we've been saying this a lot lately. Dudes, guys, gals, stop gambling on shots. Gamble on the stock.
Yeah.
Gamble on the stock. Don't blow up your stock opportunities. Stay in the game. Stay with it. Be patient. Gamble on that rather than taking a 70-yard shot that maybe you're like, maybe.
If you think you're moving too slow, you're not.
Right.
I'm just telling you that.
You'll hear that too.
Not.
Guys that kill, they're like, when you think you're going really slow, go slower.
And again, bring it back to Lampers. I remember watching, I can't remember if it was I think it was mule deer, an archery mule deer hunt where he had it all on his Instagram stories. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching that thing and I'm like, holy crap, Ryan, just kill the dang deer. I'm like, you're taking, and he'd get into like 50 yards or whatever, and it'd take him all day long. And he'd sit there, and because, the situation wasn't just right, which he had to do because, and as he talks through it too, he's going, look, bad shot is out of the question. If I don't have a good shot, done. And he'll just sit there
because he's not gambling on the shot.
Right.
He's gambling on the stock.
Yep.
Maybe something will pan out. Maybe the critter will do this. Maybe the critter will do that.
And so he'll get into 50 yards and sit there all day long and wait for that thing to give him the shot that he wants. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't do it, he backs out and tries it again tomorrow. But the big thing is that animal did not know he was there.
Yeah.
And so he's still in the game on it.
Right. And that's where I'm seeing, I'm doing the same thing nowadays, and it's panning out. It's paying off. And in the past, I would have blown up shots. I'd have been at 50 yards, and I'd have tried to sneak it through the tree because that's my shot. There's my moment. And it's like, no. And a lot of times what has happened is, yes, they've gone up and they fed over the hill and disappeared. And then I'm like, okay, they don't know I'm here, though.
Yep.
My bull from last year, that's what happened.
Yeah.
A couple of times I was right in bow range, could have taken shots that were a little sketchy, and then the old Brian would have. But I'm like, nah, get a really good one. Get a really good shot that you won't miss. You know you won't miss. And it took another 4 hours of freezing to death and, curled in the fetal position on the ground next to all these cows while the bull had disappeared. And then he came back 3 hours later after wallowing and doing his thing, and he gave me a tight shot, and I smoked him. But I could have shot him that morning, that afternoon, earlier in the day, but they were shots that that maybe I would have made.
Yeah.
But this shot I knew I wasn't going to miss.
Yeah.
And having that patience is I think big deal.
Yeah.
So you're going real slow on this bull, and you're just moving inch by inch. And
excruciatingly, my brother was, afterward, he's like, I was wondering why in the heck you're going that slow. And I was like, well,
there is a gamble.
I don't think I can go slow enough.
That's the thing. That's what I feel like too. I see again,
because I'd get going and it'd be like a kind of a tight spot trying to squeeze between some sagebrush. So I'd pick my butt up, try to get through some, and I'm like, oh crap, he saw me. That was a dumb move, but so I just settle down, get a look at him, see where he was at, and just be like, all right, slow, just over and over.
Because again, you're gambling,
and I've got all day.
You're gambling on the stock. He might get up and wander off, and there goes your opportunity. But
at that point,
it's kind of like, I know that's a risk every time I go on a stock because I'm so cautious now. I know I might not get there fast enough.
Yeah.
But my thought process is, if I go faster, I'm probably going to screw it up anyway. So you only have the one option, and that is to be stupid slow.
Yep.
Now, some guys, they're just different. They go in, blow it up, and they're good at making quick snapshots as the buck is running away, and they call it. And some guys, that's how they do it. That's their thing. I don't want the animal to ever know I'm there, and I want to take a really controlled shot that I have all day to take. So as you get closer to this bull, were you experiencing some adrenaline? What was going on here?
Probably about 20 minutes before I actually had to make the shot. It was super weird. All of a sudden adrenaline. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is good.
Yeah.
Because I can get this out of my system by continuing to crawl.
Right.
And so it was probably more like that might have been the point too that I realized I've got pretty good odds I'm going to kill this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I end up, I close those last, probably 10 yards or so, and I'm out of cover. The sagebrush at this point, you're starting to get kind of into the trees, and it's just it's just grass now. But I've still got this big juniper. That thing can't see me through it, and I can just kind of peek around the edge of it with my binos, and I sat there and I watched him for a long time because I was debating on whether or not I was going to be able to get an ethical shot at this thing. Mm-hmm. I knew I was going to be able to shoot it, but I wanted to make sure that I could catch some vitals, and I sat there and I thought about it for a while, and I'm looking back, and my brother's super impatient down there because he's closed this distance too, mm-hmm. and he's going, why are you not shooting this thing? Mm-hmm. And so I would, and I mean, I looked at that thing over and over again with the glass, how he's laying, what he's doing with his head. Yeah. And I was like, the thing is, if I get out here and something, I can get kind of his attention drawn, without just walking out and going, hey, I'm here.
Right.
I was like, if I shuffle out here on my knees, the way that he's acting, he's pretty drowsy. I'm like, maybe he'll just pick his head up and look. And if he stretches that neck out, I can drill him. Mm-hmm. I mean, sure enough, that's
wild.
I was on my knees. I drew my bow.
You came to full draw.
Yep.
And then creeped out on your knees?
Creeped out on my knees at full draw. And
at
I was
30 yards.
At 30 yards. And
so he sees movement?
Something made him, he had to notice something. And he just kind of picked his head up and stretched his neck out like they do when they're trying to look at something. Yeah. Stretches that neck out to look at me, and he's just dead head on. And I'm like, I know where to shoot him. And, I was already at full draw, settled everything in, executed it was a great shot, and just thunk, right in the chest, right where it needed to be. Well, at that point, he kind of starts. I knew I hit him good. I just knew it. Is when I heard that arrow hit, I could see my fletching, and I'm like, he's dead. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of whether he runs or not. He started to push his legs up from underneath him, and all of a sudden I hear thunk. My brother's down there 35 yards away. He saw the thing start to get up, put another arrow in him, and he just another great shot. It was an amazing shot at that angle. Mm-hmm. And
he's got 2 arrows through his lungs.
Stiffens up and just flops over right in his bed. It was
just dead.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That is wild.
It couldn't work out better.
That is wild because you can blow that moment up so easily.
Oh, yeah.
Ruin it.
Yep.
Reading the situation.
Yep.
is
and like I said, I spent probably 15 minutes there at 30 yards just going through the process in my head, how I wanted this to work out.
Last year I shot my KUIU deer. I think it was 64 yards or something. They're tiny targets. Same thing though. He bedded and I had him there. And he's in the grass, so I could see his head, but not really his body. But I put the binos on him, and I could see through the grass, could see the stripe on his back, his backbone, his shoulders. I could see where his lungs were. And I just picked it apart with my binos for a long, long time. Figured out what piece of grass I actually needed to aim at. And if I punched through that grass, I would hit him square in the vitals. Spent a lot of time dissecting that situation and whether to shoot him in his bed or not.
Yeah.
And these animals, they jump. They're quick. They can, an elk as well, dodging arrows and such. And I was like, man, with him sleepy, laying down, I would rather shoot him right there. And I felt like the way I'd been shooting all week, I'd smoke him. And I drilled him right through the spine and into his lungs, and he was dead on the spot. Yeah. But that situation, waiting for an animal to stand up.
Yeah.
A lot of times,
well, and
I want them to stand up on my terms.
Yep.
Now, they will stand up, look around, stretch, maybe turn the other way and give you that chance. But, man, I love it. Like when I was with Sloan on his property, I'm like, get 100 yards away, rattle, rattle, rattle with the antlers, sound like 2 bucks sparring, move into 80 yards, move into 70 yards, move into 60 yards over the course of minutes. And I want that buck to stand up and look at you.
Right.
So that he doesn't look at me because I'm 18 yards away.
Yeah.
And that whitetail buck, he stood up, looked straight over there just like we planned. It took like 10 minutes for him to finally get agitated enough to stand up.
Right.
But he stood up on my terms, looking in the direction I wanted him to look, and I smoked him because I had a buddy there who could do that. In this situation where you got in tight and your brother was also in tight, it's a lot of guys wouldn't have thought that they could make that front-on shot.
Right.
But
there again, it's another one that I've talked to so many people about it. I've
scenario.
Yep. And if it had been 60 yards, I wouldn't have taken the shot.
Right.
I wouldn't have done it.
Yep.
But I'm thinking to myself, 30 yards and in. I mean,
pipe late every time.
It's easy.
Yep.
Because I work at it, I practice it. I shoot my 3D targets head on.
Yeah.
And they're smaller than an elk.
Right.
It's just
prep is big.
You got to make that preparation. And if I wasn't confident in it, I'd convinced myself if he doesn't do
what you wanted,
I'm not gonna let this arrow go.
Yeah. I do that all the time now. It's like I come to full draw, I analyze, I'm like, how do I feel?
Yep.
I feel like I'm gonna smoke this thing.
Yep.
And then or I don't, I let down. I'm like, nope, it's not right.
Yeah.
And that's again not gambling on the shot anymore.
Right.
Like, it's a real good feeling on the shot, or I let down and wait for something better.
Yep.
So
I hate chasing gut shot animals.
Yeah, wounded animals, all of it. So you've come some ways now.
Yep.
In the archery career and stuff, and smoking whitetails from a tree stand. I find that I'm much more calm on a stalk than I am in an ambush.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Ambushes, I'm on a stalk. I'm like aggressive. My adrenaline stays low. I'm committed to the process and killing. I'm calm when I'm in an ambush situation. And the animal's getting closer and closer and closer and coming in. Oh, dude, I need someplace to vent that energy and stuff. I don't know
where I lucked out this year was I had a a couple of small bucks come through, and I'm like,
Right.
and then a doe comes through, and I'm like, and then I was like, all right, yep, your adrenaline's going. Got to sell. You got to get that heart rate down, because I knew something else was coming.
Yeah.
Once that doe came through.
Yeah.
So I was able to get myself calmed down, but it's still, it's because the tree stand, they have to do something for you.
Right.
You're
There's a little helplessness
stuck.
there.
You're stuck.
On that Coues deer last year, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I did come to full draw, and the adrenaline went and slammed me hard, and I was like shaking and stuff, and it's 64 yards on a little target to poke, and I was like, okay, you're not making this shot, not with this. It was like, and I felt pretty calm, and all of a sudden adrenaline just snuck up and slapped me, so I let down, and I waited about a minute or two, and I'm like, all right, now that initial dump is out of my system, I'm feeling good. All right, now draw, and I drew very calm, and I pulled through and made a great shot.
Yeah.
But you got to know, trying to force the shot the first time would have been foolish.
Yeah. And again, that's another situation where the odds are not in your favor. If you're forcing it, the odds are not in your favor. Yeah.
It's the same on the stalk, as well as the shot. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's cool to see where you've come.
Yeah.
You just need to do another late season elk hunt and not wimp out on me next time.
I didn't wimp out this year. We're going to do one. We're going to do a freaking cool late season elk hunt.
There was one good 6, but it was like a 1,800-foot drop or something straight down to kill them.
It was a long way.
And we still had so many elk to explore.
Yeah.
But looking back, I'm like, but he wasn't really the bull we were after. He was a good 6, but
yeah, we were chasing.
I'd seen some sheds and some bigger bulls in there a couple years before.
Yeah.
But we need to plan another one.
Yep.
Anyway, I hope you guys like this podcast.
303 Trophy Husband.
303 Trophy Husband on Instagram.
Look up No Limits Archery, Alpha Bow Hunting Challenge.
Phil Mendoza.
Great resources there.
Yep.
Online resources. Phil's got a lot of online content available to you.
Yep. Very, very good information. Go to No Limits Archery if you're here in Denver.
Yep.
And it's all good stuff.
Come hang out.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. Stay gritty.